Hi everyone, there's far more people than I'd like, so I'm going to take my glasses off. That makes it all a lot less daunting. My name is Jonathan King, as I was kindly introduced by Janet. This is my friend and colleague, Johan Byran.
Hello.
He's not on the pamphlet, but he's here by authority, and he'll be helping me with this talk, and you'll see why later. We're both here on behalf of the Beat Your Demons project, which we've started off, and we're here to talk to you about a conference that we're holding next March at Cambridge University in collaboration with the University and the Cystic Fibrosis Trust. And it's called Moving Mountains, and it's about making the impossible possible with exercise. To move on to that, let me just give you a little bit of background about myself. I'm a doctor, I'm 30, I work in a hospital, and I'm also a person with cystic fibrosis. I'm standing here before you today looking relatively well, and within reason I am so, although I'm sure as soon as Johan starts talking, I'll cough and splutter all over his talk, but he's prepared for that. But the reason I'm standing here today is because of exercise. Why am I so keen about exercise? Because essentially it saved my life. 3 years ago, I came back from a trip to India where I was working as a doctor for a charity, very sick. I'd left with lung functions of 67%, which is reasonably good. It allowed me to work as a doctor full-time, 12-hour shifts, 13-hour shifts, 12 days straight, 4 night shifts in a row, socialising well, working full-time. Nobody would have known particularly. And I came back and I had lung functions of about 24%. I was hospitalised for 6 months, and the lung function actually dropped to 16%, which, to put that in context with regards to my function, meant that I was on oxygen 24 hours a day. That goes without saying. I needed a ventilator at night to help me breathe for an hour or two, merely because breathing was so tiring that I was exhausted by the end of the day. I had 4 to 5 sessions of physiotherapy a day, bringing up, well, a tumbler's worth of sputum, and that made very little difference to how I felt. And whereas 10 weeks previously I'd been pulling night shifts and working all day, I could barely walk to the end of my bed to brush my teeth. It would take me about half an hour all in all, cycling myself up, walking to the sink, brushing my teeth, taking a break, brushing my teeth, taking a break, walking back to bed, and then sitting on the ventilator to get over the excess exercise that I'd just done. So I was hospitalised for 6 months, and at the end of the admission, I was eventually discharged, slightly better than that, still needing oxygen to walk, still needing oxygen overnight, still needing a ventilator. But I was discharged to see the, discharged home, but referred to see the surgeons because I needed a lung transplant. That process of referral takes a few months, and I decided that given that you have a 2-year life expectancy at that point and only a 60% chance of getting lungs, if I were to live for those 2 years, I wanted to A, increase the chances that I'd live long enough to get the lungs, B, make sure that I'd get through the surgery as much as possible, and also just have as good of a quality of life as possible during those 2 years so that I wasn't housebound. Maybe once a month I could go out with my friends with or without oxygen. I embarked on exercise. Initially, it was just walking to the end of my bed, walking back, being on the ventilator. Did that twice a day, and that was how it started. By the end of the 4 months, maybe 5, just before seeing the surgeons, I was out on the street. I no longer had the oxygen. I was running non-stop. I could do 4.5 kilometres in about 25 minutes. And by the time I saw the surgeons, they agreed that I was a lot better and, in fact, discharged me completely. And that was 2 years ago, and I haven't been back to see them at all, and I've never even come close to having to see them at all. Was it just exercise that helped me during that period? I believe it was, but I needed the support of others as well. I had a great healthcare team that supported my ambitions and goals to push myself, even though maybe it was more sensible to stay in bed and just do airway clearance techniques. And I also reached out to peers who had been through similar problems, pushing their body beyond what they should be doing in order to achieve goals. And that's where Johan comes into play. So I'll hand over to him.
Just going to grab that. Hi everybody, I'm Johan, and I'm not going to top that story. I think John is truly amazing. I'm 29 years old. I'm also a doctor. I'm a GP and also a specialty doctor in palliative medicine. But my story started when I was 18. I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. Some of you might not know what that is, and it's a chronic systemic disease that affects joints. And you might be able to see from my x-rays, over the time, my joints have slowly and started to deform. I suffer mainly from pain and stiffness in my joints, which is why running marathons or doing ultra marathons is a really bad idea. It's also why I've done 18 marathons to date, an ultra marathon and an Ironman. I'm also a husband, and I'm not going to tell you which one of those 4 things are the most painful for me. Along this process of John getting better and getting off the transplant list, we met. And while we have mutual friends, I didn't really know him before. So I thought it was really brave that he reached out to me. And it was just a Facebook message. It was after my 8th marathon in Frankfurt. He sent me a really nice message saying that he was inspired by what I had done. And he really wanted to get on that road to being better. Something that he said was really poignant, and I'm just going to read that out. It said, "Our conditions are completely different, but you're doing something your condition shouldn't allow you to do." And that's really important. We don't want to be defined by our conditions. Yes, we have to live with that, but we really want to still fulfill our hopes and ambitions of what we'd always wanted to do. So John was inspired to make a change, and I thought that was really important. It was also the right time for him to make a change. If he was in bed, out of breath, brushing his teeth, not really a good point to say that I want to run a marathon. When he was off the transplant list, he had achieved his first goal, and that was brilliant. And now was the time to start setting more goals. He'd brought his resources together. He had a great healthcare team, great doctors, physiotherapists, to really support him to achieve what he wanted to achieve. And he reached out for support, and that's where I came in. Fine, we had different problems and really different conditions, but as we talked over the months, really the hurdles and obstacles we had to get over were really common. There were so many commonalities in our stories. Most of them related to trying to date girls, but there were some commonalities in exercise as well. This always reminds me to my business studies classes about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, this relates to business and how employers motivate their employees to be more productive and ultimately earn more money. But this is so relevant to how we treat patients with chronic disease in the healthcare system. A lot of the time, if you're thinking about GPs, they only have 10 minutes with their patients. So we're only really meeting the bottom rung, the physiological needs, things that we do to be able to cope with living, whether it's washing, brushing teeth, or even getting to work. But what we should really be striving for is self-actualization. Now, what that means is allowing the individual, the patient, to problem solve for themselves, to set their own goals, and to really fulfill those dreams. Now, just because I was diagnosed with a dream, or diagnosed with a disease, my hopes and dreams and ambitions for the future never changed, and my expectations of myself never changed, and neither did it for John. So we set a goal of John running the London Marathon. 3 or 4 weeks later, he gave me a call up and he goes, "Mate, I don't think I'm going to be able to run the marathon." And I thought something really bad had happened. Maybe he had another infection, maybe he was back in hospital. And he said, no, it's nothing like that. I just really don't like running. No time wasted. He goes, cycling's my thing. I'm going to take up cycling. And I thought, that's brilliant.
Having said that, cycling my thing is an overstatement. I hadn't cycled for 20 years at that point. It just wasn't running, so.
He only told me that probably about 4 weeks after he'd bought a £1,000 bike and we actually got on the bike. And I'm going to get back to that later and show you some photos. But our journey, and I think Nelson Mandela really summarized this really well. He goes, "The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but rising every time after we fall." And John fell a lot. 20 years off the bike, and this is how he honed his skill in falling. He could fall safely, softly, and on command. This was actually how he spent the first 2 weeks trying to stop and even turning sometimes. But he was fantastic, and he achieved what he wanted to achieve. Yeah. You can plan for problems. For rheumatoid arthritis, I know mornings are difficult. It's painful, it's stiff, so I wake up a bit earlier. I do a bit of exercise, I have a hot shower. There are things that you can plan for. But along the route, and this is one of our teammates, there are going to always be crises. And that, again, reflects a chronic illness. There are going to be those innocent, Thursday afternoons where you just start to feel a bit unwell and a flare is going to come about. This actually happened 30 minutes into us embarking from London to try and get to Barcelona. Niroshan fell off over his handlebars and sustained an injury, and he needed to be hospitalised. But these are some of the barriers that we had to achieving our goal physically. I'm just going to hand over to John, and he's going to explain some of the barriers he encountered as a patient with cystic fibrosis.
So as Johan said, some of the barriers you can plan for, some you can't plan for, and those you can't, you hope you have the support network around you and that you can come up with ways to combat it. They fall mainly under physical, mental and emotional. Physical is obvious, things like shortness of breath, not getting the oxygen to your muscles, so you literally can't cycle or run or walk or climb any further. Mental being the part where you push through that to try and see how far you can actually push yourself beyond that, because you're scared of how that's going to feel, but you're going to persevere nonetheless. And emotional, for me personally, was complicated with this, in this instance. Firstly, the emotional feeling of having those symptoms that a year or two previously had been the symptoms that I knew meant that I was about to die or that I needed a lung transplant was something I didn't particularly want to revisit. Emotionally also, because I'd pledged £12,000 for getting from London to Barcelona, and well, I hadn't, thankfully, but other people had pledged £12,000 for me to get from London to Barcelona. And if I failed, I wasn't failing myself, I was failing the whole team of people who had sent me nice messages, liked my posts, shared my posts, and donated. And all of that, and these are just 2 or 3 examples of barriers that I had, meant that training was difficult, exercising was difficult, and the cycle itself was difficult. There are other complicated things like, and this is quite common I'm sure with people with CF, the embarrassment of coughing in public. I didn't want to go to a spin class because I didn't want to be at the back coughing and spluttering over everyone, looking like I had, maybe I'd come back from tropical area and Ebola period of time. It was all a bit awkward. I didn't want to start asphyxiating, not being able to breathe with nobody around that understood that I had cystic fibrosis. I'm a young guy, I'm supposed to be quite fit. Even cycling with Johan and his friends who were going to come and join us, I didn't want to emasculate myself in front of people that I just didn't know that well. So there's lots of barriers, and this isn't unique to me, and it's not unique to a big event like cycling to Barcelona. These barriers are dealt with on a day-to-day basis, whether it's walking up the stairs to go to the toilet, walking to the shops to buy the milk that you need, going to work every day. I still have these problems going to work, trying to look like a healthy doctor to my patients, not wanting to cough on them, not wanting to be short of breath running upstairs. And we did overcome those barriers, and every day I do overcome those barriers, and people with cystic fibrosis overcome those barriers every day. I'm not going to sit here and talk to you, I'm not sitting here at all, but I'm not going to stand here and talk to you about how we overcame those barriers. That's going to be spoken about at the conference itself. But suffice to say that we did overcome those barriers and we did get to Barcelona. Even Johan needed a break, the super Johan at the bottom needed a little bit of a break. We, as a team, cycled every mile from London to Barcelona. As an individual, I cycled every day bar 1 because I was unwell. And with lung function of 35%, I cycled almost 50% of the mileage. So that, to me, is kind of winning. We also raised just over £10,000 for Cystic Fibrosis Trust, and we're aiming to finish that off and get to £12,000 by the end of the year.
John also has another problem. He chronically undersells himself. So the bits of the cycle he decided to choose the hardest ones. So the day that he had off, just the reason why he had one day off was because you get massive bowel obstruction with cystic fibrosis. It's not just a lung problem. And John just couldn't take the nutrition. I remember him having breakfast and then going up to his room later, and he was vomiting. And apparently this had been happening throughout the cycle. This was about day 10, maybe 8 or 9.
Yeah.
And he hadn't told any of us. It was only after going up to his room did we realise he was cycling on empty. Let alone, he would then be at the bottom of the Pyrenees with a 4.5 kilometre climb at about 10 to 15% gradient. So all you see is this road going up. And he turns to me and he was like, "This is my time, I'm going to do this." And I'm thinking, why? But all that comes out is like, yeah, mate, it sounds like a good idea. And he did it. He got to the top. Our story, all these principles of trying to overcome conditions, chronic illnesses through exercise, it's not just about exercising, as John said, it's about motivating someone to exercise, maintaining that consistency. So moving mountains on the 5th of March 2016 is really about trying to get people together to share their stories, trying to get health professionals together to really provide an insight into all the things it takes to overcome a chronic illness. And it's not just about surviving, it's really about succeeding with a chronic illness.
obviously we want to invite all of you here today to come along and listen to the talks, but if anybody here has a story of achieving, helping somebody achieve, or perhaps a barrier that keeps coming up and you don't know how to get through it, or it's clearly a problem that nobody's really focused on, email us, let us know. We'd love to have you talk at our conference if we can slot you in, and I'm sure we'll find a space for you. There's the contact details of our conference coordinator and project manager, Shirley, at the bottom there, and we'd be delighted if you were to email her and for you to sign up as delegates, and we'll send you the information packet once it's processed for the new year, so you can all attend.
I just wanted to finish by saying that being a doctor for a few years and a patient with a chronic illness, I was completely ignorant to what John had to do on a daily basis. You know, I think what he did cycling from London to Barcelona is fantastic, but actually getting up every day and going to work and living a normal life is phenomenal, and that's the real achievement here, and that's the achievement of patients with cystic fibrosis. Getting up every day, persisting and persevering with that. There's one more quote I want to leave you with, and it's by Christopher Reeve, and it goes, "I think a hero is an ordinary individual who finds strength to persevere and endure in spite of overwhelming obstacles." And I think that really does summarise John. I think he is a hero. And if you don't take my word for it, take Superman's. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.